Senator from Alaska.
Request that proceedings under the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Thank you, Madam President. I have come to the floor this evening to discuss America's tremendous natural resource potential and to again highlight the fact that if we choose to, we can absolutely produce more of our energy to meet more of our nation's needs. I also want to address an argument that is often made in opposition to new domestic production, because I believe that each and every member of this chamber needs to know the facts and the consequences of our current approach. Without a doubt, understanding how much energy we have is at the very foundation of an energy policy. And Madam President, you sit on the Energy Committee with me. We talk about our nation's energy policy. We talk about an all of the above, a balanced energy portfolio. So it is important to understand what it is that we have. For resources like wind and solar, it's pretty easy. They're renewable, so theoretically we should never run out. But for conventional resources, which make up about 83% of the energy that America consumes, it's a different story. Oil and natural gas and coal aren't located on the surface of the earth, so we don't exactly know what it is that we have and where we have it. We gotta look around for it. Finding and quantifying our resources is a tough enough task. Adding to the complexity is the litany of the technical terms that are used to describe them. They're proved resources, probable reserves, possible reserves, unproved reserves, and our demonstrated reserve base. And then we move into the resources, which are different from the reserves, and that list includes 8 more categories, and every one of them means something different. And I'd imagine that most people don't have a great understanding of these terms, and by and large, I suppose that's fine, unless you happen to be a member of the United States Senate, because we are tasked with helping to formulate our nation's energy policy. We need to know the details and the distinctions. Before we make critical decisions that affect the price and the source of our energy supply, it's our responsibility to know what our experts think that we actually have in this country. To help gain a better understanding of our nation's energy base, Senator Inhofe of Oklahoma and I requested a report from the Congressional Research Service. The report was first released back in October of 2009. And then just in November, the CRS experts updated that report. And it's entitled, U.S. Fossil Fuel Resources Terminology, Reporting, and Summary. Fascinating, I'm sure. It actually is fascinating. And it should be required reading for each and every member of the Senate. Education is not the only reason that we released this report, though. We also hope that it will help to set the record straight. Too many of the facts presented here, particularly about energy, are based upon foregone conclusions. And in some people's minds, we're supposedly running out of oil. Well, because we've always been running out of oil. So at our request, CRS also surveyed existing government estimates to determine just exactly how much conventional energy that we think we might really have. And I think most would find the results surprising. The truth is, our experts don't believe that we are on the verge of running out of oil, out of natural gas, or of coal. Far from it. According to the government's own estimates, the United States actually has the largest fossil fuel endowment in the world. That's worth repeating. Here in the United States, we have the largest fossil fuel endowment in the world, larger than Russia, far larger than countries like Saudi Arabia and China. And within our own endowment is an incredible source of oil, an estimated 163 billion barrels of technically recoverable resources. Again, going back to that terminology. But this 163 billion barrels of technically recovered resources would be enough to maintain current production for more than 60 years. We have huge volumes of natural gas, potentially more than 2,000 trillion cubic feet. which would last for 90 years at today's rate of consumption. And our coal resources, Madam President, our coal resources are truly unrivaled. At 264 billion short tons, our supply will last for more than 200 years. I'll put up a chart here that kind of speaks to what we're looking at in terms of proven reserves and recoverable reserves when we're talking about oil. Back to the CRS report, they found that we have a tremendous range of sub-economic resources that are not yet commercialized, including an estimated 100 billion barrels of heavy oil, more than 800 billion barrels of shale oil, and up to 320,000 trillion cubic feet of methane hydrates. Now, for oil shale, that's over 100 years worth of conventional oil. For methane hydrates, that could be an amazing 14,000 years worth of natural gas if we endeavor to find ways to produce it. Looking at the chart, because I'm throwing out a lot of numbers, a lot of years, it's kind of tough to get your arms around all of it. But if you look to the share of proven reserves only within our country, it's about 28 billion barrels of oil, 17%. The rest of America's recoverable oil, or 135 billion barrels, 83% of what it is estimated that we have within this country are reserves that are, for all intents and purposes, off limits to us. So the share of proven reserves that we're talking about, the 17% versus the 83% of recoverable oil that is off limits to us. The numbers in the CRS report are our best experts' best estimates on how much we have out there, how much oil, how much natural gas, how much coal, and the unconventional fossil fuels that lie here within the United States. And these numbers can be obtained by anybody who works in Congress, anybody who's capable of navigating on my website. Go to Senator Inhofe's website. And I do hope that members here in the chamber will make good use of them. Because not only does this report provide objective figures for the Senate to use, it also casts serious doubt on many of the false arguments that are made against new domestic production. And so I think it's important to recognize, again, what it is that we have. This is not any classified secret. These are the reserves that we know that exist. I want to give a couple specifics here, if I might. When we hear about some of the language or the statements that are made and are accepted as fact, there's a claim that's heard regularly here on the Senate floor. I even heard it used by the President last week when he said that the United States has just 2% of the world's oil reserves, but consumes 25% of the world's oil. Well, that line is designed to make its audience think that the United States is both running out of oil and also using oil at an unsustainable rate. But the truth is, government officials have claimed that here in the United States, we've been running out of oil since about 1919, but we're still the world's third largest producer, behind Russia, behind Saudi Arabia, but we're well ahead of everybody else. So if you think back to the categories that I named earlier, and I'm talking about the different categories of reserves, you can see why simply referring to reserves is misleading, because those account for only a very small sliver of our total oil. So to classify a barrel of oil as a reserve, you literally have to drill and prove that it is there. And so by definition, that excludes all the lands that have never been explored. So that's the big chunk of the pie here. It excludes a huge range of places where we believe there is oil, and in the end, It dramatically underestimates our nation's oil resources. Consider this. The United States proved oil reserves. The share of proven reserves over here, the 17%, our proved oil reserves have never exceeded 40 billion barrels. But over the past 110 years that the United States have been producing, we have managed to produce nearly 200 billion barrels of oil. So on the books, we say there's only 40 billion barrels, but we've been producing nearly 200 billion barrels of oil over the past century. That alone should cast the doubt on the words of so many. So arguing that we have just 2% of the world's oil is like arguing that your checking account, but not your much larger savings account, counts only towards your net worth. I'm only going to count what's in my checking account. I'm not going to count what's in my savings account. But in reality, I have all of this. I have the whole combination. The reality is if you've got money in both accounts, neither provides a complete picture by itself. Oil is much the same way. Between 2008 and 2009, our reserves actually rose by more than 8%, even as we produced about 2 billion barrels of oil, and that was made possible by our substantial resource base. So why claim that America is running out of oil when it's not the case? The easiest explanation is that it's an attempt to turn perception into reality. If Americans can be convinced that we have no oil, we'll stop demanding that our government allow access to it. Instead of running out of oil, we'll simply stop producing it. And in some people's minds, regardless of the economic consequences, the end result will be the same. And the reason I'm so encouraged by this CRS resource report and why I am encouraging other members to review it, and the reason that I'm so disappointed by continued claims that America has nearly exhausted its resource wealth, is that an understanding of our true energy potential helps point the way to a viable national policy. Instead of locking up our lands, we need to open them up. We need to streamline access, streamline permitting, and bring more of our own resources to market. And doing so will not only allow us to increase domestic production, but also decrease domestic consumption. And these steps aren't mutually exclusive. Given our energy and our fiscal challenges, they're actually dependent on one another. And let me put it into context a different way. For years, Alaska's congressional delegation has sought to allow 2,000 acres of the non-wilderness portion of ANWR to be opened to development. And usually when we talk about ANWR, we talk about how much new oil production could result, probably somewhere between 800,000 and 1 million barrels a day. Truly, that would help us out at this time. But left out of that conversation are the tremendous revenues that would accrue to the federal government. According to CRS, those revenues would reach more than 150 billion. I'll repeat the number again because we're looking for dollars around here. $150 billion at today's oil prices. And if we use those revenues wisely, we could make great progress, serious project on deficit reduction and serious investments in new technologies. Right now, there is a bill from the Michigan delegation that would increase the incentives for electric vehicles by an estimated $19 billion. Great idea. But the problem, the reason the bill's not going to go anywhere is there's just no way to be paying for it right now. Now think about what would happen if we brought ANWR into the conversation. We could fully fund incentives to put not just a couple million, but upwards of 20 million electric vehicles on the road. We could help create an entire industry, even as we fully protect our most valuable resource, which is the American taxpayer. At the end of the day, our decision to produce more of our own oil would be matched by a tremendous reduction in our oil consumption, thanks to the advanced vehicles that we deploy from the revenues from oil production. But by holding back production, we hold back progress. And for far too long, I believe that anti-production arguments have prevented Congress from developing a coherent energy policy. We see them again today. They say, oh, it's the speculators, or oh, producers aren't using the lands that they've already leased, that's all. But today we're also seeing the consequences of those arguments. Higher gasoline prices, a weaker economy, and a loss of international standing. And the longer our nation waits to develop its resources, the longer we wait to create new jobs, to improve our energy security, to pay down the debt, to invest in next generation technologies. The longer we decide it's acceptable to import oil instead of producing our own, the longer we will continue to export our wealth, export our jobs, and the other benefits of production to other nations. CRS's new report on America's true energy potential should, I think, be an eye-opener to us, and I intend to circulate a copy to every Senate office. I would ask that my colleagues take just a few minutes, look through this report, understand what it means for our energy policy, and then join me to make sure that this Congress takes advantage of the opportunity that it presents. Madam President, I see that the Majority Leader is on the floor. I have a short statement recognizing